So thank you again, everyone. So this is the LatinX AI organization. I'd like to give you a little introduction about our org and the work that we're doing and some history, and then also what we're going to be doing moving forward from here. We've got some really exciting things and programs that are planned for the org and for the community that we would like to share with you. So for anyone that is not familiar with LatinX AI, our main mission is to create opportunity for the Latinx and AI community. Specifically, we focus on research and engineering, but of course we understand that this goes much broader than that as well. Really everything that we're doing is really affecting the larger Latinx community around the world. So we want to ensure that the work that we're doing here, the work that researchers and engineers are doing is representative of Latinx community as a whole. So a little bit about our organization. We are, of course, volunteer-led. So, we all put a lot of time and energy into this on the side. It's something that, for a lot of our members is, really a passion project that we enjoy doing for others. We like to support education and research initiatives. So any type of initiative that is co-facilitated that's focused on education or research within this space, we like to promote that as well through all of our different channels. So that includes obviously like Twitter and all of our social media channels, as well as our Google groups and our mailing lists. We are now offering a more in-depth mentoring platform, which I'm going to be going into details about that a little bit later. But of course, we've started with mentoring with our main workshops, which has been pretty successful so far, where we've connected some different individuals for on-site mentoring during our workshops. But we're looking to broaden that up as of this year, which is super exciting. And of course, our goal here is to nurture a continuing relationship with academia, industry, and governments. We understand that part of the work that we're doing really coalesces and combines all of these different groups, right? Research that is being done shouldn't necessarily be siloed within just academia or just within industry. We want to ensure that it is a collaborative effort between different organizations and entities, because that's the only way you're going to push progress forward for the community and for a greater Latinx AI. And part of the work that we've been doing already to ensure that is by increasing representation at these global conferences. Before our organization was started, there was no self-identified representation of Latinx individuals within these large and machine learning conferences, NeurIPS and LXAI and so on. I'm sure there were people that were attending, but they didn't necessarily have a place to come together and really share their work and their identity and what was important to them in doing this type of work within the community. So we're glad we've been able to not only create that space for other people, but to, of course, increase that representation overall for the community itself, and not just for Latinx individuals, but for the AI space. We understand and we believe very strongly that in order for AI to be representative of the world as a whole, it has to include everyone. And then for us, obviously, it's very important that it includes Latinx individuals. With the work that we've been doing, we've started to create this job openings network, which has really helped, especially in combination with some of our corporate partners, to ensure that people that are looking for career advancement and want access to other opportunities and resources, that we've been able to connect them. And that part of that work is sharing specifically job openings within our mailing list. Part of that is, of course, sharing the CVs and resumes of individuals within our network with our corporate sponsors. So if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, we'd be happy to give you more information. And we do offer opportunities for you to submit your resume and your CV anytime we host an event like this. So we'll be putting the call out after this social takes place. And if you're looking for a new opportunity, please just submit it, and we'll send it over to our partners. And with that, obviously, comes the furthering career development, and bias awareness, I know, is an issue and a topic that has been talked about a lot. We cannot obviously stress the importance of bias awareness and really ensuring that we're mitigating that bias within the AI and machine learning community, and we're trying to do that obviously with representation. So I'm not going to go too much into detail about that, because it's been talked about a lot, but I want to ensure that that's always in the forefront of our minds in the work that we're doing. A little timeline for this organization. So LatinX and AI, the coalition launched in 2018. It is a subsidiary of the Accel Institute, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization who has been functioning since 2016, again, with that goal of really lowering the barriers to entry of engineering artificial intelligence and fostering inclusion. And a lot of that is through education and ensuring that people really understand, what are those barriers that exist for minority groups within the field to break into this space and to do that work. So after we launched in 2018, mostly through community awareness, through hosting like information sessions and town halls, and then some fun gatherings and some tutorial sessions just to educate those who are really entry level into the space, we shifted more into the research space and started focusing on growth and really developing our own programs. And currently the main program that has been running is our official workshops. Thankfully, we were able to model after the Women in Machine Learning organization and the Black in AI organization, who had been doing really great work already within these major AI and research conferences. And we wanted to ensure that, as the Latinx population and identity is different, even though it does encompass many of the same groups, and oftentimes there is a lot of, intertwined representation there. It is really important that we as well, or anyone that identifies Latinx, also still has a space that they can come and really, share their work and find that connection and collaboration. And then for 2020, our main focus for this year, obviously, is leadership and capacity building. We are obviously trying to expand the number of conferences that we're hosting, both official and unofficial events at. But then also past that, we're looking to host some new programs, expand our mentoring session, and then build out a new platform for the organization itself, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about in a moment. For those that have not attended our prior events, we do have them all listed on our website, so feel free to peruse that information, but it has been a very fun and exciting time over these past couple of years, getting people together and really hosting at these different spaces. And I just wanted to share really quickly some of the survey results from the last major workshop that we hosted at the Neural Information Processing Systems Conference last year. So for us, of course, the most valuable thing and what we think is super exciting is that we do have members that are located all over the world, and they're representative of many different cultures and many different countries. And that's something that I think is very unique about the Latinx identity is really you can be from anywhere and live anywhere and speak many different languages, and yet still carry that identity of Latinx. And so as an ethnicity or a group, I think it's really fascinating for us to both look at, our similarities, but then also our differences, right? And be able to work with that and take that into consideration when developing AI going forward. So, and of course, for us, it's really a point of pride that we can, say that, hey, we've been able to help people who potentially haven't had access to these major conferences gain that access going forward. And so most of the people that attended this session, specifically at NeurIPS last year, said, this is their first time and they would not have been able to participate otherwise. So we really appreciated that. And of course, we do encourage all of our members to, take part and become volunteers at the main event, and then also with our organization. For us, it's really important for us to show that solidarity and that people can find camaraderie in the fact that, they can get together and get to know one another and say, hey, there is someone else like me in this space, right? And that's doing this kind of work and that I can collaborate with. Some other interesting metrics here. We like to survey the group to find out, okay, well, what are the primary languages that people within our community speak and so on. And we're going to be broadening this as well. When you look at the other percentage, we understand that there's a lot of different dialects or native languages as well that are spoken in different countries in South America. And so we would like to get more concrete numbers on what those languages are and then how we can better have them represented as well, not only within our organization, but then also for the research community. We have seen a lot of groups specifically doing research and increasing natural language processing data sets for languages that are not as common or frequently used these days. So I think that would be something kind of fun and unique for our community to also look into as well. And I'm just gonna kind of skim over these next couple slides that are part of the survey. I'll just point out a few important things to ensure that we're good on time. But for us, again, really important. Most of our members said they were able to connect with other researchers. They were able to learn new research and techniques. They were able to receive mentoring at the event itself on our workshops. 22% received job offers, at the event. We thought that is just amazing metric to include. Others got connected with PhD opportunities, and then some people were able to mentor others. And again, that's exciting to be able to share your work with others in the field and to help new incoming career researchers kind of get in the space and to find their place as well. Overall satisfaction was really good. Yeah, so just in general, we really appreciate that people were able to join us for NeurIPS. And before we get started with our first official talk for today, I just wanted to let everyone know as well, we're hosting our next full workshop at ICML that'll be upcoming in July. Obviously, it was also supposed to be hosted in person, but unfortunately, due to the current situation that we're in, it will be moved to a virtual conference similar to what we're enjoying right now for ICLR. And thanks to ICLR very much for all their amazing organization. I hope ICML is able to learn a lot of really good resources and tools in order to transition. And so the main difference at a major workshop is that obviously we go through the whole peer committee review process. We ask people to submit their abstracts, and then we will choose, our program committee chairs will choose the oral presenters and poster presenters that'll be selected to actually take part in that full workshop. So I encourage you to join us. You can find it at latinxai.org /ICML-2020 in order to do so. And with that, we'll be expanding our peer mentoring to be a several-month program rather than just happening at the day of the event. And I can go into more details about this after our invited talks today, but it is something that I think is very valuable to join and sign up for. So if you're interested in getting involved either as a mentor or in receiving mentoring, please do so. Again, you can find it at that same link, ICML-2020, or bit.ly /LXAI-mentor-ICML-2020 or -mentee-ICML-2020. Okay, and obviously join us online. Great, so we're here today at ICLR, which is super exciting. And obviously we were supposed to be hosting this for the first time in Africa, on the African continent, in Ethiopia. And it's really unfortunate that we were not able to go and experience that amazing space and country. But obviously, we're still able to get together today, so that is really exciting that people have still made this opportunity available for us. So thanks to all the organizers at ICLR for putting this together and trying to make it as seamless as possible. For our invited talks today, we actually surveyed the community and asked them to submit nominations for people within our community that are using artificial intelligence in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We thought it would be really important, considering the crisis that we're currently in, to ensure that those people who are doing work in this space have an opportunity to talk about their efforts and to share the importance of those efforts as well. So two of the invited talks that we have were individuals who were nominated, and so we were able to get in contact with them and ask them to come and join us. So we're really excited to have them with us here today. We'll also be doing an honorable mention of the other individuals who were also nominated, who were not able to speak. So we will let you know some other really cool efforts that are happening right now that we think you should look up, and if you're curious about them, and just give them a clap or reach out to them and say, hey, thanks for your work right now. So the first speaker that we have joining us today is Juan Manuel Banda Orozco, who's on the call already, and he's going to be talking about characterizing the COVID-19 epidemic with natural language processing and his group at Panacea Lab. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and turn over the screen sharing to him and allow him to get started with the next portion of this talk.
So I'm assuming that now you can hear me and you can also see my screen, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so let me just get started with this then. Cool. Yeah. So, like Lara mentioned, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Juan Banda, and I'll be talking about how are we uh, kind of seeing a different face of the COVID-19 epidemic. Using NLP and machine learning applied to a very large, or at least large data set of Twitter chatter that's related to COVID-19 that my lab as well has been releasing and maintaining over time. So just a little bit before this started. So I'm just going to explain how I got into this position of working on this and talking about this. So I started, with PhD in computer science, data mining. I started working with image data, but suddenly I went to Stanford and shifted a little bit into the biomedical space by, being a postdoc and a research scientist there at the Shaw Lab using machine learning methods to extract data from unstructured data sources, as well as mapping and using making actionable all this structure and unstructured data that's available in clinical records. From there on, I continued. I became a collaborator in Odyssey, which is one of those open communities. And with my work related to probabilistic phenotyping, which uses weak supervision, so this is how the machine learning and all this stuff is kind of flowing into my path. And also I'm a part of the NLP work there, where we work on standardizing resources that are making everything interoperable with Odyssey and its vocabulary. So if you're not very familiar with Odyssey or the vocabulary, like I said, don't be too disappointed. This is more of my clinical, and machine learning and for biomedical purposes research. So today I'm talking about this little tangent that I found myself in. Now I'm a professor assistant professor at Jersey State University, like Laura said, and here I work with epidemiologists, on identifying mobility patterns during natural disasters. So this is where I started getting involved in this, social media data, and also with epidemiology, which turned out to be a very fortuitous decision, as I was able to do work for this COVID-19 based on working with them. And also some of my other background, and I do extracting drug use from social media data. I did that a lot for the public reported reports like fairs and all this, also on clinical notes. So one natural transition was to do it in social media. So before we get too deep into this, I'll go quickly into what is working with social media data, kind of a very quick one-on-one explanation of it. So everybody knows it's big. There's a lot of it being generated. I believe the latest numbers put up around 200 to 300 million tweets generating a day. And that is just from Twitter, right? We have all these other social networks that I'm not even aware of anymore because I'm not young and cool anymore. So I have no idea what's going on TikTok and any of those places that I hear mentioned. This data, it's big. It's incomplete in the sense that, yes, I mean, yeah, you have the messages, at least in Twitter, great, but you don't have location most of the time. You don't have where the user's from. I mean, or if the user is real at all, those kinds of things. So that makes it very incomplete. It's also ugly in the sense that anybody can make an account on social media, right? You can have 45 accounts. You can make your own bots to post in those accounts. You can just be a troll in one account and then be a non-troll on another account. So it's ugly in that sense, right? There's not a lot of attribution. When I work with clinical data, well, I mean, I might not know the patient personally, but at least the data is attributed to somebody, right? Here in social media, it kind of is, it kind of not, right? Another issue here, people don't write the normal way. there's a lot of shorthand, there's a lot of colloquial terms, and all this stuff changes over time, right? So working with clinical data, I was used to, I mean, clinicians writing notes, so they use certain vocabulary, there's certain language that it's, fairly standard. I said fairly standard because if you worked on this type of data, it's not that standard, but still, it's somewhat control. And social media, anybody can, every single person can misspell the same word any combination of possible ways. And one other thing to know about this is that it doesn't represent all the population, right? So that distribution that I have on the right, a statistic I basically created a poll, kind of represents the ages. So it's highly focused on people between 18 and 49. And this chart, funny enough, if you look at this chart over the years, it started kind of shifting from younger to older people as we keep growing up and we kind of stick to our guns in the platforms that we use. Another thing with social media data is that there's tons of amplified signals that are noise, and this is due to there's a lot of bots, there's a lot of trolls, there's a lot of just people or automated programs just retweeting things, right, like bots, but I mean, not as easily detectable as bots. So if you're just naively looking for any signal, you will find some signals that are hugely amplified, hugely, overestimated if you're not aware of all these little caveats. The other thing is, it's not free, and I'm pretty sure some people might have been like, "Wait, what?" Well, not really, right? I mean, you can go to Twitter, you can get for free access to 1% sample data. You can't scrape Facebook. You you can't make apps that collect information anymore after we all know what happened. It's not legal to acquire, like I was mentioning, for Facebook, or you can't scrap forums. Certain other places have terms and conditions. If you're not aware of them, you should probably check them before you start doing a project. And it's not easy to get, in the sense that, fine, you can get some, but if you want to get volume, that's kind of tricky. That's why I had that little quote in it, a little asterisk, because there's caveats to all this. But still, it's one of the mediums that is somewhat freely available. Everybody can access it, everybody can get it, compared to things like medical data or any other more protected data. So moving on that, not everything is bad. One of the things that I like about this type of data is that anonymous opinions are usually more honest, which is good and bad, because I mean, once you spend enough time looking at this type of data, you will see some opinions and some comments or some people posting stuff that you're like, wow, I can't even believe that somebody thinks that way. But at least you don't have the filter of accountability that talking person to person has. It has very unique challenges. It's short form text for the most part. At least in Twitter, is 280 characters max. So there's only so much you can do. All of us have done NLP with uh, papers or documents, then yeah, you have thousands and thousands of characters. Here you have very little scope, so you have to be very very precise with what you're doing. It's more colloquial, it's very ambiguous, and it's expressive in different ways. And I like putting this emoji here, in the sense that people express themselves a lot through emojis and through other things that you won't capture by just looking at the regular text. It's tons and tons of it available. Again, I mentioned that it was not that easily accessible or free, but there are a lot of places where you can go and get stuff. Usually when people ask me, hey, can you get me all this data, this is the first place that I'm just point them to, right? There's this Twitter stream in archive.org that has 6 years of data. So you can start playing with it there, and then get into the more advanced parts of mining your own and pulling from the stream and whatever. So let's start, and how my journey started and how we started with the COVID-19 stuff. We started collecting data. So thanks to that, we work with epidemiologists like Dr. Chowell at GSU. We started collecting, data early in March, which sounds, quote unquote, because come March 13, everything just was not chaos, but everything kind of unraveled, and a lot of people started collecting data there. At least we had a little bit more data. We also received a lot of contributed data, and this is the nice thing about one of the nice things during the pandemic is that a lot of people are very willing to share data. I said people, not companies. Some companies are getting better at it, but mostly people within terms and conditions and everything. So we got contributed data from January and February. So we have a nice longitudinal set now, and this is after we publish our data. So and this is something that I'm going to get into a little bit. So we published our data before we even did any analysis on it, which sounds counterintuitive, right? A lot of people are kind of like cringing. There's a lot of groups that don't, they're just laugh at me when I say that we did that. But still, right? I mean, I think, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but now in this time of need, the more eyes that you can have on some type of data, the further away you can get to, the better work can be done too. Because I mean, I'm not expert on, hundreds and thousands of different topics or methods that could be applied to this data. But if they have the access to the data, at least they'll be able to do a better job than me, maybe a little bit. So short answer, yes, it was crazy to publish it. Obviously, we all know that data now is the most valuable resource according to many places like The Economist and other publications. But I think that it should be shared pretty much always. Depends on privacy stuff or just some other sensitive issues, but in the most part, it should be shared. It should be shared, right? Public domain, or at least no commercial use, open access. And one of the things that I've been doing through my career has been doing this, right? I've released multiple data sets and scientific data. I release all my code. I make my data fair when it's possible. I've written for Dryad under a little blog. So I've been on that train forever, and hopefully some of you guys are liking that. It's a shift that is changing, because before most people would just sit on data until they publish as much as they could out of it and then release it, maybe, or put it in some FTP that was going to go down in a couple of months. So now there's all these mechanisms like Synodo where you can be a little bit more persistent. So anyway, so this data set that we released consists of 230 million tweets. One very important thing, it's not only English. We focus on working on multiple languages. A lot of most of NLP is done in English, but now there's been more in French, Spanish. So we're pushing that direction as well. We're not only working in English. And this data set is available. Anybody can go and download all the tweet IDs and then hydrate them, because that's how Twitter wants to share stuff. We have a preprint on it, and we release updates almost every 2 days. So we put up daily updates on our GitHub page. We're servicing, a lot of people are using this. For languages, like I mentioned, we have a bunch of English, but we also have a very close second in Spanish, French, and Indonesian. So we have at least 500,000 tweets in probably more than 10 languages, which is quite nice. It's quite different. Obviously, it's highly stacked towards English, but you can find a lot of this stuff in this data set. So it's not only exclusive for English or North America or anything like that. We have pretty good distribution of tweets. This is just collection stuff that I just put on my website to look pretty. Geolocations, we have some. That's the problem, and that's good in a sense, right? I mean, people are more aware of their privacy, so they don't leave all their geolocation on, and everything gets geotagged so they can be effectively tracked. There's still some people that do that, but at least in this data set, there's not that much. There's enough to get some nice stuff and some nice visualizations on it. But I mean, obviously, in an ideal world, I would like all the data to be geolocated as a researcher, but not as a privacy advocate. So interesting conundrums there. Anyways, there's place location enable, which is some different type that just geo coordinates. That's more data has that. And for NLP uses, a lot of people, the most common things is that, people want the frequent terms. So we release that. Nice word cloud. We release the top 1,000 frequent bigrams, which is also, again, looks nice. And we also release the top 1,000 frequent trigrams. And we refresh this every week. So the full data set gets refreshed every week. And all this stuff gets refreshed with it. So you don't have to go and get everything if you only need these things for whatever NLP purposes you want to use this kind of data. As the data set being used, I'm quite surprised. I never had anything in my life be as used as this. And we released the first version pretty much a month and a week ago. So first version was March 22, and it's grown. So the green, the blue is number of tweets, and the little orange line is the total number of downloads. We're pretty shy of almost 10,000 downloads in less than a month and 5 weeks. So I'm quite happy that a lot of people have used it. We've been able to advertise it pretty well. A lot of groups have been downloading it, have been asking questions, have been sharing what they're finding on it, or if they have any, questions they ask. It's fairly that's the whole point of this, right? The more eyes we can have, the more people can make out of the data. So what can we kind of look at, for this type of data? So again, I'm not going to talk only about work in my lab. There's not a lot of people that do social media research. There's not a lot of people that do social media and COVID research yet, but there's still some groups, and I think that their work is there as valuable as anybody else's work. So I'll talk about some of what they've been doing on parallel to what we've been doing. So you'll see papers, citations from other people that you're more than welcome to go and see what they did, their methodologies and different things. So this disclaimers are that not all work presented here is from my lab. Not all the work presented here using the same data set. And I put a little asterisk on this. Why? Because we're probably not, maybe not by name using the same data set, but we are using the same data. Why? Because we all have access to the majority of the groups that I've seen doing work on this have access to the same, Twitter stream 1%. So I'm pretty sure overlapping. We're not taking the data set we're releasing. We only take data that people volunteer. We don't go and absorb all the data sets. That's just not cool and kosher. But if you have data and you want to share it, we'll take it, we'll put your name on it. Again, that's, we just want this to be used and people to take benefit of it. I'm going to highlight some of the work done by other groups, and I'm going to talk about how it overlaps with our work. There's a few instances that I see the paper and I'm like, damn it, I was working on that. But it's still, it's all good because, we want work to be done rather than, who claims credit and ownership on this. All the links are going to be included. And if I miss any link or anything, just let me know and I'll put it up. So first of all, one of the first questions we looked at, I'm a fellow at the Stanford Sage Research Center. So it's for, ethnogeriatrics research. So we were looking at, what is the perception of people towards the elderly and ethnic minorities? There's been a lot of discussion in the virus attacks, older people more aggressively. And also it's shown recently now with all the demographic statistics being released that also minorities are being affected. So we wanted to see, how do people taking that, right? If are people, being like, hell yeah, or people saying, this is very concerning. You'll be surprised with what we find, right? So we can, measure this perception, obviously. We actually were not expecting some of the results. We expected our hypothesis indicated some, but not all of them. And I'll talk a little bit more about this. So what we did, and this is, very typical of NLP-ish, classical NLP-ish, without too much hardcore machine learning. So we started by, curating terms that identify early populations and ethnic minorities. Obviously, there's a lot of biases in this, not biases, but ambiguity. We identify the tweets with those mentions. We took it a little bit further and, we build machine learning models to disambiguate ambiguous terms. But by this, I mean that, we have high precision terms like, elderly. You're not going to say the word elderly pretty much in out of context. But if you say old, then that could be used in tons of different ways, right? The same thing, with other terms. So we build models to kind of disambiguate the use of like word, the word old and those kinds of things to make sure that we had tweets that were at least fairly, that could be attributed to elderly populations better. We use sentiment analysis in Beta, which was one of the ones that's enabled and trained on social media data. And then we did some manual review to identify, tweets for correctness of polarity. So Vader will tell us if it's polarized towards negative or positive. We just had somebody look at it and say, yeah, this is it, this is not, and this is where, you find the interesting things, right? And we had a good comparison baseline of tweets. Why? Because, we're not just going to analyze a signal on COVID data and then say, yeah, it's there. We need to look at previous data where people were not talking about COVID to see, what are their how they behave then. So we have that for ethnic minorities. This is work that it's pretty much under submission. So uh, don't take print screenshots. Not just kidding. So we have that, baseline proportion of tweets, and the sentiment for this is that if you see, and it's kind of interesting, at least 50% of the tweets that are, for related to race are actually negative. And there's a lot of things that you can think there, which reflect many other things that I'm not going to get into. There is 30 to 40%, the 35% of them on average are positive, and there's neutral tweets about, at least automatically tagged. How does this look? So this was in December of 2019. Let's look at how that changed on March. In a period of 2 weeks in March, the polarity of negative went higher to almost 60% higher, 50 some percent on average, and the polarity of neutral, kind of stayed around the same. That makes sense. And positive became lower. So what does that mean? That the calculated proportion of negative versus positive tweets increased 28% towards sentiment on racial minorities. This is concerning. Why? Because people didn't want minorities to, I mean, at least some undocumented minorities to get stimulus, or this type of argument saying that let them get infected, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of very nasty tweets that I had to go through manually, that some of that I wish I didn't have to look at. But anyways, so we show that there was an almost 10% increase negative sentiments over the period. And if we look at the whole data set, or at least starting from January all the way to the end of March, we see that that sentiment actually went higher. At first, in the early days of January, when this was it was being discussed mostly as a virus from a different country, and that the sentiment was pretty high then, and then it kind of started simmering down, in the sense that people realized that, well, everybody's getting infected, so now we need to concern ourselves with something a little bit more productive. What about the elderly? Here is where we find interesting signal that wasn't quite clear. For the elderly, the polarity is obviously different, but it's kind of averaged out. And so we looked at some manual reviews of this, and we actually found that a lot of those tweets are, you know they use terms that are negative, which that's the problem when you're doing some automated analysis with lexicons, that those terms are tagged, but they don't take into consideration a lot of the context. And the context of those tweets was that people were being protective by just saying that, if you say, I do not want my grandmother to die, an automated sentiment analysis is going to say die negative, right? But you're actually being protective about it. So, and that's something that you can't really capture automatically, and this is something we notice here. Other kind of work, this kind of shifting a little bit, is that people wanted to see, okay, let's do social distancing from geolocated tweets. So Mark Dresde and this group of people, they published this Twitter social mobility index. That was awesome work. uh, you know uh, they had the data, we didn't have the data, we couldn't do anything like that, and it's great that they did it, where they basically they calculated how much people moved. So they had people from all over the US with the location and geolocation enabled on their tweets. They kind of calculated on average in a period of time how much they moved and how much that decreased, over time. And you can see that, wow, I mean, that was very cool that, they were able to show that, yeah, people were moving around. Obviously, in December 2019, when people are traveling, that's high. And then that kind of totally dropped, after the whole shelter in place, and, people, the measure, the social distancing measures got a little bit more serious. So this work is awesome. You can see the abstract. I think this is an archive. I don't know if it has been published yet. And the author said they're going to release some of their data on that website, but I haven't found it yet. Anyways, so what this brings to a very interesting problem that we're trying to solve as well. That proper location is quite scarce in this data. So not everybody has the data, their location enabled, and that's kind of good for privacy purposes. So we want to, but if we want to identify regional patterns or trending conversations symptoms, etc., we can't really do that very well. So, we're actively now working on the user location data. So a lot of users, when you sign up to Twitter, you can say that you were based off Narnia. Twitter will allow you to do that because it's a free text field. a lot of people are quite nice and they say, yeah, I'm from, San Francisco, California, SF California, SFO. So there's still, you see that it could lead to a problem having a free text field where people can, put that stuff very messy. So we found that at least in the data we had that, data with clean user locations means something that we can map automatically to a place, country, state, whatever, was around 22%, which is not that bad. But just by doing some basic curated mapping tables, which is something that I love from the biomedical field that a lot of people cringed at, we could get an additional yield of another 23% tweets recovered. So that's pretty okay. However, this is not enough. We still only have 50% of the data, which will leave us to what? Only 27 million tweets, which, it's not that great. It's not that much. But we want more. So we're working, using this thing that somebody published last year at, EMNLP, this turning hierarchical location prediction neural networks, a group of Carnegie Mellon, and their method was pretty good at assessing basically putting a location to a tweet, but we're kind of expanding this to work on 5 languages. Obviously this is very early work in progress. I'm just pointing out the direction we're taking on that. Another thing that we looked at, and this is something that a lot of people ask, is that, okay, can we identify, self-reported exposures to COVID-19, right? So there's all these numbers of the people that you see, all the, COVID tracking project, New York Times, even CDC have all these numbers of people that have been to the hospital or have been tested. But the majority of people that do get this get it very mildly. They have very little symptoms or very few symptoms. So but some of them actually do talk about this. A lot of people talk about, and it's amazing what the type of people, the type of things people talk on Twitter. But anyways, so this group here of Graciela Gonzalez, they actually, and this is one of the groups that does a lot of this social media mining work, by the way, big shout out to them. And they actually did this, and they were able to identify, how many people were reporting exposure to COVID-19, using a bird-like model just to assign, probable or possible exposure. And then they got the locations from those tweets. So they have this very cool plots on this paper. This paper is in medRxiv now. I'm pretty sure it's under review somewhere. But they have this pretty cool, as you can see, the number of, users that are posting those probable, possible or probable COVID exposures. You can see how it's growing up in California, which, incidentally, if you look at this and you look at, the number of people that use Twitter per state, this plots look very similar, but it's just a proportion that, it's just found on the data. So this is pretty cool work, but that, people can somewhat, use machine learning to attribute exposures from tweets. Other people have done, and this is another work that we're this very cool work that they did. They identified self-reported symptoms. They curated lexicon. They did manual review for attribution. So after some self-identification patterns, so at least you remove your subset of tweets. And Abed Sarkar and his group, they did this of this research. So which is quite cool. That you show the symptoms, how many, and this plots they show how many symptoms people reported on their on their timelines. So that's actually interesting because you're extracting relevant thing that you're attributing somehow. I'm not saying that the attribution of something on Twitter is the biggest problem there is, right? Because you can't, I mean, if you mention something on Twitter, it doesn't mean that you had it. Doesn't mean that somebody that you mentioned it had it. So you need to do a lot of work around that. That's why a lot of this is manual curation for now. So this was cool for symptoms. Obviously, we've been working in these directions. We participated in the COVID-19 virtual viral hackathon a couple of weeks ago. And we were looking at this in a very similar way, in parallel to this guys. This guy's got their papers out, great for them. And the way that we approach this is a little bit different though. So we're doing the lexicon-based stuff, massive vocabulary, annotate as much as we want. After we clean the tweets, we remove retweets, bots, duplicate text. So we get a very smaller set, but I think that that's the clean set, basically the super clean set. We annotate those tweets. We get over 300 million annotations. Wow, that's a lot of stuff that we can't really process. Very simple. So we narrowed the scope by using curated lists of symptoms that were found on EHRs, and those symptoms, they're very nice because there's symptoms that people wrote, uh, clinicians wrote on patients' charts that the Nigam Shah's team extracted and made available. So we took that list and we matched it to what we found on our Twitter annotations, and lo and behold, we find that obviously we find a lot of pneumonia, influenza, cough, anxiety, which is an interesting one, pain, depression. So we were able to identify stuff, not naively, but in a very traditional NLP way from tweets. Also, misspellings is something that it's not very considered in many studies, but we consider misspellings here. So we generated all the possible misspellings for those terms based on keyboard layouts, and then we re-annotated. Obviously, there was a lot of those new misspelled terms are actually other words. So we kind of disambiguated those by training the models to determine basically, a model that says this tweet is talking about a symptom. That type of tweet, that type of model we learned, so we can disambiguate, at least better than nothing on the ones that we now get annotated with misspellings. And if you notice, the frequency of misspellings is actually higher, right? So obviously pneumonia has multiple spellings, but if we consider it as with all the other misspellings, we found a lot more tweets like that. We found a lot of stuff with rashes, infection, stuff that the misspelling brings, finds an extra layer, or basically we effectively doubled our data by just looking at the misspellings. So that's something very critical to do in this kind of environment. uh what about the attributions, right? So the other two works that were done, great work, they talk about the attributions. So here we also use some similar expressions like I experienced, etc., to identify candidate tweets. We reviewed some and trained a model. This is a very traditional NLP way of doing this. you know However, with the misspellings, we were able to find more tweets to at least I like to say it, that we have a more robust model because we also annotated tweets that had the misspelling by hand and add those to the model. So we had basically a 70-30 ratio of tweets that were found with the positive word that were annotated as yes, and 30% that had the misspelling that were annotated as yes, part of the model. So that gives us a better, not better, well, a better performing model, I think. Can this be done and easier? And this is where our work is kind of going now. And we're still having some very, preliminary work on this, that, we have using weak supervision for the attribution. So instead of, relying on annotations, we want to rely on rules and heuristics, right? And as a preview, it does work. We had better performance with half the training effort. Like, we curate our rules, and that's a lot. I mean, it takes time to make our weak supervision rules with Snorkel, but it's less time than actually annotating a bunch of tweets. And also the big advantage of our work is that we're doing this for four additional languages other than English. So we're going to be releasing models, we're going to be releasing dictionaries of misspellings and all this stuff in four other languages soon. We worked a little bit on finding prescription drug usage. So a lot of the basic work that we do in my lab is finding drug use on social media. So we tweaked it to do as preliminary work for the next slide. But we want to find what are you saying, but what people are saying that they're taking or they want to take. And there's been all this controversy about hydroxychloroquine and all these drugs that were recommended uh, by accident, I want to say, to people to take. So this is bad. So we did a simple NLP approach again. We generated a lexicon. We generated the misspellings for the drugs. We attributed the tweets. So we had already models trained on very large data sets of tweets that are referred to drug use, and we also use other works from other authors as well that's listed on that paper. So we attributed the drug use in that. Why we want to do that? So we did find the typical drugs that you would expect: chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, and all the ones that were mentioned. Ibuprofen as well was mentioned as bad at first. So all that data is reflected in what people are talking about. And notice that for this we removed any tweets that were from news outlets or that had links to news sources, because that could have been, copy paste in there. We wanted to get the drug stuff figured out because we were looking at, misinformation dissemination, and that was one of the big issues, right? When somebody picks up a meta-archive paper that obscurely says that something is effective, then the media goes crazy and they say, oh yeah, this is awesome, this is a silver bullet, and then people take that and people run with it. So we want to be able to trace all that. So we're using some, we're identifying drugs, we're being able to see which users want to take them or are true that they try them too, and we want to, try to use that kind of methodology to identify where the misinformation is coming from. Again, this is very vague, but it's, kind of the direction this is going. Some people might be wondering, hey, this guy's been talking for a while, what about topic modeling? We did try that. We're still looking into it. It's quite tricky with Twitter data. Why? Because, every day you get different slice of the world, and every day there's a lot of stuff that's new coming out. So you usually get a bunch of topics for even a big corpus of 4 million tweets a day. You still get a bunch of topics once you try to tune your LDA. We're running dynamic LDA to see if that helps us, to see how this evolves. What else can be done? So there's a lot of stuff that could be done for mental health analysis. There's groups that are being reached out to me and I've been in touch with that are working on this, and they're using this data set. How social media distancing measures are being perceived, that's something you can look at here. Are people agreeing with leadership in the direction of public health measures? That's something that you want to, at least people in sociologists want to look at and think about. So that's something that people are looking into. Before almost done, the acknowledgments. This is a lot of work that me and my PhD student now, Rami, have been doing. She's looking for a summer internship. If you're looking for somebody that's looking for for NLP stuff or machine learning. Anyways, we also got collaborators at GSU. They've been great helping us, guiding us, because I don't know a lot of the epidemiological stuff, and he's been very patient with me with that. Extra data provided by this group of guys from Colombia, from Missouri, Barcelona, Germany. So we had very international set of people that said, hey, I have data, let's put it together. Dr. BJ Periacol for the aging stuff that we're looking at, and some funding from Stanford State Center. If you want to get involved, and now I'm going to shut up. This is my last slide. If you have more data, let me know if you want to share it. Do you have interesting questions? We can run stuff on all the data. We have it, a very nice platform that we set up to, do quick analysis on different topics. We're always looking for funding, especially for COVID stuff. I pivoted all my research, well, not all my research, but most of my research to COVID. And so I'm trying to find a balance in that. If you want to get in touch, you find me via email or via Twitter, and you can access all the data. There's some visualizations, and all the updates are mentioned on this website as well. So I think that now I'm done talking, so I'll stop sharing and turn the screen back to Laura. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Juan. Let's give him, kind of a round of applause. If you know how to do that in Zoom, you can clap for him. So I think that would be really appreciated, or just post a note in the chat saying thank you. Okay, so it looks like maybe no questions right now, so maybe we'll hold and do some questions later on. Next presenter for today, we do have David Gonzalez Aguirre. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm probably not, so please correct me once you come online, but he's a senior research scientist from Intel Labs. And he'll be talking today about towards high performance surrogate robotics, and specifically how robotics can help in situations like this during a pandemic. So we're really excited to have him here with us today from Intel. And now if you would like to share your screen, David, we would really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and sharing a little bit of the work that we are starting and pivoting from what we do at Intel Labs. I guess, as I mentioned before, this work is towards, because as you know, when you write a paper or any comments, it's just something that we recently started. We have a lot of experience and background in our time, or PhDs and postdocs into the domain, but it's being very kind of difficult to start transfer or getting into that from the industrial. Little by little, we're pushing that development. And that being said, let's start into the outline of the presentation. First things first, we're going to be talking a little bit of what is the Intel pandemic response? What is Intel been doing, and how do we try to help and make possible some impact positive in this? So let me double check, because I think my resolution might be too high, but can you guys see properly my screen?
It's clear to me.
Okay, then I'll proceed, just because trying to make that changes right now on the fly is probably gonna take me a while. Then I will discuss a little bit of what the anticipatory computing lab where I belong and execute my work. What is the research? What is our vision? And what are the domains that we're interested? Then more specific, we'll discuss a little bit on the concepts, the representation methods, and some experiments, sharing a few videos with you guys. As you can imagine, those that have or are working in the industrial settings, there is part of the work that you can share due to the fact that it's been published or has been allowed by permission. There is some other work that not until it goes to a process, it's difficult. Therefore, I cannot share everything which I wish, but I can discuss some of the interesting details. Then I will show you a video with a very clear end-to-end explanation about how can we build a low latency wireless robot to robot and robot to human imitation approach. And then I will conclude fast with the steps. This series of images here basically show you a little bit what is the state of what is happening. You know, there is a lot of available technologies that are being used in the intensive care unit. So there is a way to monitor and keep some sort of a help, but the vision is that we will be going into a more aspect of being able to help in remote places. Of course, COVID is the most pressing moment right now, but there might be other use cases where we really want to have the ability to have robots helping. And as this technology evolves, there is going to be a transition phase where you will need to have humans taking the role of the decision makers or the planners. And for that, we're missing some of the elements that we need at the level that might turn into a feasible products and a feasible performance. Okay. One of the things, and personally, kind of a motivation or learning that I've been having from this kind of a difficult time that we all been experiencing, is that there is something good about the whole nightmare of the COVID, which is we learn that very positive things. That doesn't matter who we are, where we're coming from. We have a underlying nature of society and humans that is being connected, and people are being more sensitive about it. That we also are aware that it doesn't matter whether it's your age, your circumstance, you wear your mask and you take care of trying not to approach to anyone, because you know that you might not have anyone in your family that might be age or because of your location. For instance, myself, my family is in Mexico, and my wife and son are very, very young. So, I mean, my son. So this is the point that I'm not concerned, but I definitely think about the life of other people, and I follow those. And we know that we're really fragile in this goal. So the natural strategy that I see is the collaboration in the sense of empowerment each other through what we can concretely execute and do. That's where the view of lab where I belong about empowering solutions for improving life quality makes a lot of sense. Intel has been very committed on these from multiple venues. One way is there is an initiative that is called the Open COVID Flash, which is something that Mozilla organized together with Intel and other big players in the tech domain that enables people to use IP or licensee or certain technologies free of charge and full agreement if you're using this technology to help people in the sense of diagnostic, prevention, of treatment. This is particularly important where you think about the scope of that, how it works. It allows you to use that and after the World Health Organization has announced that we're out of that stage, out of that situation, the licenses still remain for a couple of years. That is very good because that will definitely avoid the ripples in terms of what we can bring in technology. Another aspect that Intel has been taking care and into this is trying to bring resources immediately to the protection equipment, and also to try to provide some funding. Previous presenter probably should take a look at what are the specific venues that Intel is in the requirements, because we're thinking about that the research that might be able to help does not come only from the companies or the universities, but a cohesive collaboration and sharing and understanding of those resources. In particular, what we are focusing right now is into the aspect of here. How do we bring artificial intelligence, high performance, connectivity, and cloud solutions? And that, if you look at all of these elements, mobile service robotics are involved in all of these. So that being said, we are internally already, it's like any other organization. When you're in a big company, there is a way to dilute, to select, to filter the projects, and we're in the process of moving forward to get more resources for this research, and both in terms of maybe collaborations and other things that might be speeding up our performance. The main picture, and I want to start going here because it gets a little bit more into the technical, is that we believe that having a representation of the task on the hand, basically, what is the space like? How does that look? What are the attributes that are relevant? And we can have a way to construct it based on sensors and act upon based on robots or other ambient intelligence actuators. We'll be able to help in situations where there is already contamination and there is the need for someone to help. That's where the telepresence of the robot might be relevant, and particularly considering that a remote connection might be able to enable people to provide care even in remote locations or different parts of the planet. And that will make the process also feasible in terms of economics. Now, the research in concrete is that we're working on probabilistic sensing and fusion, or perception of the world being melded together from different sensors and combined into a single way to access to that information, so that people who are the experts in planning and control can utilize that. We're not trying to cover the whole spectrum. We need to make sure that we are working together with people in control and planning, so that the representations that we create are consumed by them in a way that is adequate. So what does the representation embrace? What is inside them? There is metrics, so you need to have really like Euclidean metric. You have to have the ability to measure similarity, appearance, and semantics. So you need to be able to know what are the objects or part of the objects depending on classification. We also look at that from the perspective, not only from the algorithms, but how do we make this into the technologies, into the solid state processor and other accelerators, so that people can profit from that technology in a way that is, and that's also really, really interesting, and I feel very happy to work on Intel, is that once you have some IP that it can come along in the form of SDK, as you guys have experienced, once you get a product or a platform, the SDK does not come with an extra cost. So it's basically a very nice venue or channel to provide the added value. I'm going to go into the high-level concept right now of the remote robot manipulation. Its diagram is going to get a little bit dense, but let me start step by step. We have the physical reality, and you have a reason and planning person on the other side. In other words, you have the intelligence of the execution based on the human, but that doesn't mean that the human has to be able to perceive and describe everything. You might need to provide some help in terms of reducing to the objects by semantic segmentation, or provide them more information in a tailored way according to the specific action. That's what happens here in the perception block. In the perception block, we do these 4 states or elements into a cycle. We acquire the signals from different modalities. That is really important to think about the different modalities, because what the appearance picture like RGB gives you it's very different from what a range sensor gives you. And if you think only on one of them, you might be prone to have misclassifications. Combining them helps you. Plus, if you have different wavelengths of different cameras and multispectral imaging, you might be able to see things like temperature over surfaces and that kind of attributes that are really important, especially when working in biohazard environments. Then those signals are calibrated and registered and passed to what we call affordance-driven modeling, which is basically the ability to create representations that are depending on what actions are you going to do, that change what you exactly you send, whether it's a a voxel or a surface descriptor, depending whether you're going to avoid collision or you're going to be grasping. And finally, there is a level of automatic execution, because as a human, you don't want to direct every single motion of the robot in every millimeter. You want to give a kind of a high level command, and there should be a degree of autonomy that can be taken here and be passed to the actuators. And then depending on what you're grasping or moving, you need to steer your head to look at that direction. That's where the attention and focusing goes back from the control into the perception. And that's a cycle. Now, this is nice, and this is the way it works, but this is assuming that you will have the whole intelligence here, which we are not assuming. We have a human on the other side. Therefore, we need to have a communication layer. We have to have a way to transmit from left to right all the information in a way that is digestible and easy for the human, but at the same time rich enough to have the ability to transfer the important cues. In the other direction, you need to be able to send commands. This is what we call a human perceptual consumption or teleoperation. And the representations we send here, control is, in terms of volume or throughput, is very compact, is small, but in terms of latency, is very critical. You see that imposes different challenges than when you have the perception, where you might have the ability not to represent that everything in the scene at the level of 8 to 4 milliseconds. Maybe you have 20, 30 milliseconds to represent it, but there is a mass amount of information. The way we encode that and the way we transmit that, it's under what is called a co-design. We need to make sure that the algorithms here are connected to this, not only as a black box, but they are informed of the decisions. Last but not least, this eventually will come on different use cases where you will have, like, cloud resources of cloud intelligence distributed, where you might have more really autonomous robots and collaboration between agents. Those are topics that we see coming in the future. I'm going to give you a few examples concrete on results with robots that you can see what is this exactly these things mean. Here in this tiny image, you can see there is a robot and there is what the robot perceives. Let me go into the video so that we can take a look into that. Okay, I tested, and I'm sorry that it seems like changing from the screens has somehow an effect on that video. Well, let me try the next one. Just give me a second. Let me just go the full screen mode to see what happened here. Again. This is the typical worst case scenario. I should have tried without one screen. I'm so sorry. The videos here basically show you the robot grasping and manipulating, and 3 different scenes where you open doors and you navigate in the corridors or open a dishwasher. And what these videos illustrate is basically the ability for a robot to execute tasks, but they are very specific. They cannot really generalize at this point, and I'm not claiming that there is not a feasibility to go for that, but it is going to be a gap from few years. I'm talking about something between 3 to 5 years to the point that we can come into that in an effective way, and it's going to be embodiment dependent. So there is going to be a need in the short term to be able to assist the robots in the autonomous execution with semi-autonomous execution by a human getting into the loop. That shows that the amount of information that's going to be transmitted and the way that this needs to be encoded cannot be achieved with the current state of the art of codecs. Let me see if I can, once I go into the next example, I'll open just the videos in full screen. Here you have the element that connects all this process as you can see, is a representation. The attributes of a representations in terms of stability, scalability, and extensibility are going to be fundamental for the success of these. This is where we come with what we call the hypervoxel. It's a discrete element of hypervolume. In other words, a volume that is in space on time. And I'll later on go and show a little bit of how does that work. And it's for those that have been working in geometry, is the extension of an octree. But okay, in order to talk about more the representations, I wanted to lay out some really simple concepts, but very clear to see what we're doing. Representations of the space and the time, they have to have certain kind of categorical attributes that you can say, okay, what is that your representation able to connect semantic whole contain elements, kind of a topological representation where you have positions to positions and there is a way to connect. This is really important for planning. Is that metric so that you can have the ability to measure distances and angles. This is fundamental for robot manipulation. And it needs to have semantics in the sense that, as you can see here, boxes with labels to know what is each of those elements that you can in the scene consider for grasping or manipulation. Then the dimensionality, you can start thinking from augmented attribute pictures, which is what semantic, pixel-wise people have been doing, to maybe where you can avoid collisions, you can go into a 2.5 dimensional map, or you can go into volumetric, which is the case that we are very interested. Now, the structure, you cannot make it dense because it would make the problem intractable. In other words, if you just want to voxelize an area has a basketball court, you will be basically filling one of the high-end servers with computation and make no sense of the real content. Therefore, you need to go into space representations where a whole empty space is implicit, not explicit represented. That makes the problem very compelling and real time. Before I go more into the examples and hopefully show some of the videos, I want to get into the details about why grids are not feasible. And despite of the benefits, you guys in machine learning use a lot of the understand why not grid evaluation, but in terms of in space representations where you want to get in the grid attribute surfaces, there is a thought about if you could represent the space as a tree, either 1 or 2 dimensions, you will start seeing structures that are well known for you guys, like a quad tree, or in this case, oak tree. One of the important things about this is that each of the levels encodes a level of resolution. That's really important because if you just go into the 1 or 2nd level, you have a summary of the scene. So if you consider the inner nodes of this graph not only has a connection elements, but they also attribute storage, you can have multi-resolution with multiple levels of understanding of the spaces they contain. Now look at interesting pattern, which is obviously a result of binary partition spaces, is that the dimensionality turns to change the degree of the connection of the node. So when we go from the 3 to the 4-dimensional, you ended up in a tree where you have a 16 balance of the connection. Therefore, this is what is really represent one of those hyper nodes that allow you to connect the space and time in the representation. This slide in particular is basically the structure of the skeleton of what is happening, what really drives the representation that we're doing. Now, if you want to see it in concrete, how does that really map to use cases or applications? You have, for instance, in an interactive smart space, you have the ability to align and register into that representation, both in the space and time, the RGBD that, for instance, the RealSense cameras provide you, or the LiDAR with the new RealSense camera that we're bringing to the market. So you have in one voxel the ability to have points that come from different sensors with different orientations, but they are related in space and time. Also, because of the multiple entities that can go into this system, you will have multiple view, and that provides you what is called a free vantage point. This can be used for indoor and outdoor. And the main work here is how to create the algorithms that enable that registration and the data structures that are efficient. And I hope this video, oh my goodness, I don't know if it's better to go to the low resolution again, but well, it's sorry, but there is a video here where you can see all this video here, like that tells how the surface, the real-time reconstruction, and how here multiple cameras can enable the human to connect from both sides. And that allows basically to alienate and interact between humans. And as the picture is shown here, you can have physical objects and also virtual objects. This drum set here is able to be played in without having any physical object, and we can register when was and where was the last place where there was contact. This is the kind of important things that we would like to leverage these features for the COVID to avoid, not cleaning in the right places where there was contact, or to trigger depending on the situation. How does that scale? That's an interesting question, because I was mentioning, if you want to have like a larger space, you can see here, this is a downtown in Zurich, and there is basically 210 million points with color and attributes. You can still represent this in a standard laptop and being able to create it for navigation and other tasks. So that is the kind of the interesting part of the representation. If we could have this and share it for not only for for transportation, but more intense and more complex tasks rather than transportation, for instance, service robotics, cleaning, or doing services, they will be able to get this as a skeleton, transmit on demand areas that they need to work upon, and within each of those boxes have more attributes. Just to give you a sense how that represents in memory, you have two oak trees that are dual and represent the past and the future, and you have a point in the center. Whether you have a point that is inserted, it's going to be usually coming into the present, and along the time is going to be sliding as a future. And the attributes that we have had in the implementation and the results that I have going to show you later on, is in each of those hyperboxes, we have a unique identifier that enable you to basically associate a region in a space of time for reading and writing on it, whether it's inline in the memory of your host system, or it might be outside into a distributed system. There is a space-time radius that is non-uniform, so that will help you to, put a lot of resources in areas that you're operating very close, like grasping, and very coarse in areas that you are not grasping. And there is a series of more, structural needed attributes. And you can see here, and this is seen, we're evaluating, and we decided to take advantage of some of the data sets. We have our platforms and our prototypes that we have built in the lab. We also wanted to take that data sets that were pre-annotated and start looking at how does that behave. The first things we look into what we put into the nodes. You see they're having their certain attributes of position, appearance, and the labels, X, Y, Z, and the RGBD. Of course, these can be compressed. You don't need the 32 bits for that. You can do it in a different way, but we're looking at kind of a baseline. What is the amount of information if you were going to be doing naive? Later on, you can use for these other representations that are more efficient in terms of bytes. What is interesting is if you look at the level of resolution, as I mentioned before, from the 1 centimeter when areas that you're planning to do physical interaction, grasping and manipulation, all the way to the areas that you just want to avoid collision, the amount of decay of amount of memory that you need is as expected exponential or logarithm base 8 because of the underlying oak tree. And if you see at the behavior, this is the part that it gets interesting. Having that seen with 200 million semantic points and looking at how the voxelization process takes in terms of processing and in terms of the memory consumption, it follows the pattern that one would expect in a normal theoretical analysis. Of course, the ripples and noise, that's part of the operative system executing. Let me see if this video plays. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play the videos, because this is really losing a lot of the material that is worked from basically a browser from directly in the screen. Hopefully you guys my apologies about this. So this is just an example of what this voxelization with attributes and a structure brings. You'll see that as the person is being captured in a ball, you'll see that there is the whole mesh with all the attributes, including color and the connectivity between the elements on the mesh. This is really interesting because what you're looking at here is running on real time in a i5. So it's a very low, very small computational envelopment. And that's when you want to have, when you think about mobile robots, you want to be able to keep other accelerator or resources to analyze and interpret the signals for the semantics. And the structure, the geometry, the alignment of the color with the orientation of the points should be executed in a very computational effective manner. Okay, that's basically one of the things that's work that one of my co-authors, Javier, and I were doing some time ago. And this is, as I mentioned, also used for other use cases. Now, as this picture evolves, what I wanted to show that we could not see it before was this video on the robot manipulation part. That this is what I said, that sorry that it brings a little bit of the order. The robots can be able to grasp and manipulate things, but as you can see here, there is a lot of aspect that the classificators they're running and the algorithms cannot fully resolve. Going back to the presentation, let me know if you're seeing the presentation, because can you see my screen now?
Yes, we're back to the presentation.
Okay, sorry, this is a nightmare that I never had, but apparently I should have tested with lower screen. Give me one sec. I was right here. Yeah. Going back to the communication aspects and what do we need to be able to encode the information properly, and showing you the preliminary results of what we've been doing. This goes as follows. This diagram will show you the video that I'm going to play afterwards. It's going to be more detailed in the slide that I'm presenting now. And the video you will see its execution. But basically, for the teleoperation, without having to have joysticks and a lot of unnatural ways, there is a way that we can capture what the human is doing, either through the RGBD and analysis. Our first intuition is that with the current solution in terms of sensing and execution would not be running faster than 30 frames per second. 30 frames per second is very good for the robot, but if you want to transfer the motion of a human, you want to have between 120 to 160 frames per second, so that it is really one-to-one couple, and the human has a really physical virtual connection with the entities. That is precisely important when you grasp something. If there is a lot of latency, you probably are going to keep pushing or doing something because you don't have haptic feedback if you rely only on the visual. Therefore, as you may see in the diagram here, we resort to motion caption, where we capture the points of the body of the human, and they are transmitted through a wireless connection to an access point. This, what we call uplink, has a particular limitation, that is, you need to be able to fuse, in our case, in our setup, 8 cameras with 8 different positions, each one of these points, make the non-rigid alignment, and then transfer that. All that process, which is shown in this table for the first column, it takes about 8 milliseconds. And the standard deviation is rather high. And you will think about, why is that high? Well, it's because there is occlusions. And depending on the occlusions, the time that you need to resolve the misalignment, it varies. One last important thing about this table, what is called here 99% means what is the worst case performance that you have 99% of the time. This is kind of the standard that the people in telecommunications use to start evaluating whether it is feasible for industrial, for mission critical or not. This is the first approach. Of course, mission critical, you have to have 5 figures of significance to be certified as a mission critical. We're working towards that direction. Once this information is passed to the access point, it is transmitted to a server in the back end. This is a Xeon server with a 96 core processor, which enable us to do real-time computation of the inverse kinematics. You'll see in the video how the human moves and how the inverse kinematics are executed. That the way the human can move freely and the robot will take a feasible and smooth trajectory according to the current state and the target state. There is a little bit more happening inside, which is the locking and unlocking strategy. When the human gets into the volume where the robot can track and execute, the physical embodiment, in other words, the physical robot should not move instantaneously to that position. Otherwise, you will have abrupt motions that are very dangerous for people around, or also for the mechanics of the robots. Therefore, there is a trajectory policy using basically nonlinear control inside it. Then the final part is that we transmit this information to the robot, to the physical controller of the robot. At this point, you basically have a computer that is connected to the low-level controller of the robot, and you send commands in joint space, basically the speed of the joints and how it should move. If you look at this connection is bidirectional and wireless as well, because you need to know where you are currently located in your joints to determine what is your delta, because we have that in a position and a velocity control. And that is fundamentally necessary for the inverse kinematics. The longer that these two links from apart differ, that will create some sort of a shake or very unpleasant motion or appearance for the robot. And of course, that will make the system less appealing for human interaction and require more maintenance, some things that we need to prevent. If you look at the uplinks, for instance, here, where this is T sub index UL, you'll see that it's about 2 milliseconds. So this is very fast, the latency there, even though we're on Wi-Fi 6, and there might be a lot of spectral contamination. So this is a very reliable result. And this is the part that I'm more fascinated as a, when you do your work, sometimes you get frustrated, sometimes you get fascinated. This is the part that I was very happy to see, that all the computations from geometry and inverse kinematics can be run in the order of the kilohertz. And that has something to do with two reasons. One is the algorithms that we are employing and using are rather mature, and the other is that each of the phases in the pipeline were coupled with physical core. That means that each of the threads had their affinity set so that we will optimize the cache efficiency, and basically they turn into a really effective throughput computation elements. The part that it gets concerning from the whole experience is if you look at the last timing, and not in the average, but in the 99%, we have an extremely low latency in the physical actuation of the robot. It's about 40 milliseconds. And that is an aspect that from the point of view of computation, telecommunication, and perception, we cannot improve with a robot like this for one single reason. These kind of robots are called collaborative robots, and they are designed so that they can interact with humans. If for any error that we had, it will go wrong, and this robot, and you'll see me later in the video, goes against me and hits me, it has mechanisms that are executing, that are constantly testing that the amount of torque that is being exceeding and the deceleration does not exceed certain threshold. And those validity checks are being executed, and that's what makes this latency. Plus, it's a lightweight robot. The joints of each of the actuators, they have viscosity elements that change with the speed. In other words, the dynamic friction and the static friction are very different. And those are consequences of the embodiment that there is work and research, but we need to deal with those because this kind of system is where the cost-effective systems are happening. Now, because of the importance of this video, I'm gonna show the video directly from my, 1 second, from my computer, because this one has okay, here we go. And I will have to start sharing. And let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, you can see hopefully the audio comes to you. Otherwise, let me know and I'll describe what. Are you getting the audio?
We cannot hear the audio from the video.
Okay, it's fine. The system enables human-robot imitation in a high-performance manner. all the elements that enable this presentation of this connecting the physical with the virtual world. There are various technologies here that are important in this space. There is a motion capture, and there is a way to compute the velocity and acceleration from each of those points, which needs to be transferred. And you can see in the back screen, basically the kinematic frame on my right hand. As it moves, we have an update. There is a very slow latency in this particularly connection end to end. The problem turns out when it goes. This is the camera mode that we are using. They allow you to have a connection through network, and they provide you the information with a very precise time stamping that enables us also to analyze trajectories and smooth them. This kinematic frame that we obtain here allow us to basically, as you can see, get a 6-dimensional vector. It's not only position, but also raw PGO that it needs to be transmitted to the end effector of the robot. That is important if we want to follow step by step the trajectory in the time. Now, there might be occlusions, but we need to handle with them through inference. The information goes through this particularly Wi-Fi technology. And the specific stack that we're using, the wireless time-sensitive network, is within the driver background and processes in the operating system, both for Linux and Windows. That information that is being used by the inverse kinematic controller and transform each of those points along the time step by step, and it creates a small trajectory. Let me show it. Then I enable the actuation. You see that the beginning, the speed was quite decoupled. And once you are connected in the state that is stable, now you are one-to-one. Now that is locked, you can see the motion, how smooth, and you can move evenly, abruptly, because you are already within a safe margin from the border. The perception and the computation are so tightly coupled that the only latency we need to compensate is the physical mechanics. Now, the role of having such a large processor in a server for this is for the very high latency reduction that it might imply if you will do it in a single or dual core system. However, there is a way that we can improve this later on with prediction algorithms. You can see that it doesn't really matter how far where you go. Eventually, you will be able to get a fast response. You can see the screen, and the background is few frames faster than the physical robot. So that being said, we are always trying to figure out if there is a way to make sure that that latency is reduced only to the minimum. And as the results so far show, it is feasible. Thank you for your observation. Anyway, going back to the slides. Let me stop sharing these and go back to the screen. Okay. Yeah, this process that I just showed in this video is giving us a kind of a baseline understanding of where we need to have more work and more problems solved. And in particular, you could see that the perception on the motion capture system around the human is for capturing the human, and also in the experiments that allow us to have this evaluation on the robot. But there is a need for us to work on the perception of the robot. What is like really the camera that is built on top of the hand and the gripper that we're working on. That's exactly where we're working right now. And this is the brings me to the next steps. So we need to couple the visual perception that you partially saw on the videos and enable the VR interfaces. We have already done this work. We just need to bring it together into and the part that is more challenging, we need to start testing that with the robot in the platform in really contaminated places and start looking at how do we bring more value by enabling remote operation, whether it's in places that require fine manipulation or that it requires heavy payloads. That's exactly where we need to investigate and make sure that the algorithms that you that we developed coming to the open source efforts that we're pushing in Intel Labs, and also to make it available into the SDKs. And at this point, yeah, I guess I will be happy to hear questions, and maybe during those questions I might be able to find the right videos to show. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Thank you so much, David. That was a really great presentation and really amazing work that you guys are doing. Again, if you would like to thank our speaker, David, if you want to maybe give him a clap or just post in the chat and just say thanks or +1 or great job, that would be awesome. If anyone does have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and speak. If you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself and speaking aloud, you're also welcome to type the message or the question in the chat, and I'm happy to read it aloud for you.
Okay.
I guess a really quick question I have, before we give opportunity for someone else, it would be if someone else was interested in getting involved with this work, do you guys ever have opportunities for internships or fellowships that maybe an early career person could get involved in some way, or because some of it is open source, as it says here, is there some way for other organizations or maybe academics to use some of the work that you guys have already done and maybe continue to innovate on that?
Sure. The first, there are multiple aspects to the answer. The first one is we're actually currently in the voxelization and representation kind of a layer. In other words, let me just jump to that slide. If you look at this picture, okay, 1 second. Here comes. Okay, here. If you look at the perception action in terms of the multimodal active sensing and representation, we are currently transferring our algorithms to RealSense. So for anyone who has a RealSense camera, there is going to be within the next month and a half a update so that you will be able to create directly from your camera, getting outside a representation that is basically a space map with attributes and colors and summary along the nodes. That's from the point of view usage. For the point of view collaborations, we have ISTC centers where we have collaboration with different universities, and there is ongoing research. For instance, we have a particular large one in the probabilistic computing, and there is like a lot of publications and material. I will suggest to directly contact us through that channel, or send me a mail. Now, in terms of internships, we usually have 2 or 3 interns coming to our labs here in Oregon for the Visual Understanding Lab, where I belong. This year, due to the circumstances, it's going to happen, but it's going to be probably it's been announced already in LinkedIn. It's going to be remote internships. Please send me a mail if you're interested, and I might be able to put you in contact and see how can we look for some possibilities there. It is a pity that this is being into the labs and being in particularly here in Oregon and Hillsboro. It's quite a nice experience because you have the ability to come to the lab, and for those who are working currently in the universities, it really gives you a very different flavor or perspective of what happens if you decide after going for your PhD or master more into the industrial setting. And the question that we stated in our work is slightly different than the questions that you do as academic. We wonder and we work on how to solve the problem, but we have the constraints of the real world and economics in the sense of the algorithm directly, not only in the founding. So that will be very interesting. If you guys, whoever might be interested, send me a mail, and I'll be looking forward to sponsor some of those future internships. Thank you.
Would you mind sharing your email address? with the group?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Actually, if you Google me, you will find directly my email and everything that was associated with Intel. So I'm more than already available there. But I'll share to you guys my email address here.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you again. So a big round of applause for David. Really appreciate you sharing your work.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No problem. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now. So let's go. Okay, great. So we did want to also highlight some honorable mentions from the community nominations when we did put out the call for others to potentially be represented today, and the work that they're doing, in this pandemic that's currently happening that uses artificial intelligence or machine learning as well. Some of those honorable mentions include, for example, Dr. Raul San Jose Estebar, who is working for the Harvard Medical Lab, and their work involves understanding of the lungs through imaging intelligence. So we think his work is really cool. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us to present today. But if you are interested in the work that he's doing, please feel free to go to that link and look it up. There's some really interesting information available to read about the work that they're doing there at Harvard on this issue. So we of course appreciate that. And also, this is an honorable mention. I know we actually have Pablo Rivas in the room today, but we thought this work was really cool. His group at Marist College actually developed this site, which makes available data and deep learning predictions for the coronavirus disease. So if you are interested in learning more about that, you could also check it out on his website. His website is here at rebus.ai, and it's /COVID-19. So we thought that was, again, really cool. And I'm sure if you have questions for Pablo, you could also ask him directly on the chat or follow up with him after this social, since he's obviously attending ICLR with everyone this week. The next one, another honorable mention here, is Dr. Marco Moscoro. He's a robotics engineer and also runs the Fellow Robotics company, and he's leading a team currently in Colombia that has created some Raspberry Pi powered ventilators that they're working to also include some AI and machine learning techniques into the production of those ventilators. So we thought that was a really interesting project that's taking place right now too, and obviously something that's very essential as most of the world is very low on supply for these ventilators. So the more work that can be done to increase that supply is very important in this vital time. But there's a very great article that was put out by the BBC that I've linked here. So if you're interested in reading more about it, please do look it up. I think it's a really good project that should be mentioned. Okay, great. So now we're turning to the portion of today's facilitated discussion for LatinX and AI. And in order to ensure that people are a little bit more comfortable speaking during the call, I would like us to take a moment just to introduce ourselves. I know that we have about 30 people on the call currently, and some others may come and go as well. But I'd like people to get the opportunity to be comfortable speaking here on the call, so that and also familiar with each other. Part of the fun of these social events in person is that we do get the chance to meet other people who identify as Latinx that are working within this space. And in doing so, you kind of gain that familiarity and that camaraderie. And also, I should mention again, for anyone that joined us late, if you want to learn more information about our organization, please go to latinxandai.org. That has all of our upcoming events, and as well as some of our other programs that we'll be involved in. And I'll talk a little bit more about those again at the end of the roundtable discussion. And one other thing I'd like to thank my co-host for today, Javier Turek, who I think is still on the call. Yes. He said
yes.
he was. Yes. Okay, great. So maybe you can lead the introductions for this next section. You know, it was great collaborating, putting together this social. So thank you to him as well. And maybe we can give him a round of applause. Javier, do you want to introduce yourself to start out the discussion?
Sure. Hi, I'm Javier Turek. I'm a research scientist in AI in the Brain Inspired Computing Lab, which is part of Intel. And have been working on the intersection between natural language and the brain in the past 2 years. And I found 2 presentations today very interesting. And well, we'll be more than happy to talk about anything that you have in mind, from research in general to, you know, what can we do to do better these days.
Great, thank you very much. And so that's exactly the kind of introduction we would like. Just something really quick, you know, who you are, what your title is, you know, maybe a word or two about the work that you're currently doing. And then that way we can jump into the questions that we have prepared. So I'm just going to go down the line and ask each person to unmute themselves. So the next person we have is Alberto. Would you like to introduce yourself? Alberto, are you with us? Okay, maybe they're not available to speak at this moment. So it looks like Alejandro Arnal is the next person. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, good afternoon.
How are you today?
Yes, good. Yes, good. Yes, so my name's Alex, it's short, Alex for short. I am a PhD student at the University of Texas at El Paso, and we're working with image analysis of coronal sections of brain tissue to differentiate among different cell types and stuff like that, to classify them faster than a human, I guess, would be able to.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank
and
you.
Then next we have Carlos Anaya. Would you like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the group? Okay, it's possible Carlos is not available to speak currently as well. So skipping down to Diego Porres, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, nice to meet you. My name is Diego Porres. I'm now in Barcelona studying a PhD in self-driving cars, basically, at the Computer Vision Center. And basically, I just started. This whole COVID-19 froze my plans, but so far I've been doing more like paper reading, and now I'm a volunteer at ICLR. So yeah, that's how I got that's what I'm doing basically. So
wonderful.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you for joining us today. We also have Edwin Escobedo. Would you like to unmute yourself? Okay, it's possible Edwin's not available. So we'll go down to Felipe Polo. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm good, thanks. I'm Felipe, I'm from Brazil. Currently a master's student here in São Paulo. And I'm working with coverage shift correction, transfer learning, and NLP. I want to say I'm very pleased to be here with you, and that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you for joining us. Okay, we've got Gabriel Morera.
Hello, nice to meet you. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Gabriel Moreira. I live in Brazil. I have just finished my PhD at ITA. I researched about deep learning techniques applied to recommender systems. I also work in industry. I work in the CINC company in Brazil, but I'm joining NVIDIA starting from the next week, where I was invited to extend my research there in the industry. So I'm excited, and also excited to be part of the LXAI.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, great. So next we have Hugo Jer Escalante.
Hello, everyone. I'm a research associate at INAOE. It's a research institute in Mexico, and I used to work on challenge organization and things like AutoMail and language ambition kind of stuff. And I've been participating in these kind of events like 3 times, I think. So hi, everyone.
Hi, thank you for joining us. Okay, next we have Jose Manuel Hernandez. Would you like to unmute yourself and say hi to the group?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jose. I'm a data scientist at the eScience Institute at the University of Washington in Seattle. And my work revolves around using NLP methods and deep learning methods to extract information from images and of text. Currently working on a project to extract information on people that have been evicted in different counties in the US using court record images. Just happy to be with all of you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, and next we have in the room, Crystal Mohan. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm originally from the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm doing a PhD. This is my first year at the University of Vermont, and I am interested in differential privacy and deep learning and fairness, so basically fairness and data privacy, and I'm really happy to be here.
Great, thank you very much for joining us. Okay, and now we have Lourdes Ramirez. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lourdes. I'm from Peru. I'm assistant professor at the National University of Trujillo. I studied master's degree in computer science in Brazil. Currently, I'm working on a research project about sign language recognition with deep learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and now we have Maria Ortiz. Would you like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the group?
Hello, my name is Maria. I'm from Venezuela and probably the most inexperienced person here. I'm studying undergraduate computing engineering, and that's it. I already have like 6 months or less learning AI, so yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, Maria. We're really glad you could be here. And then we've got Pablo Rivas. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, for sure. This is Pablo Rivas. I am Poughkeepsie in New York. I'm an assistant professor of computer science, and in the fall I'll be joining Baylor University. So I'm in a transition, and my research is mostly in AI and its applications in deep learning, machine learning. And recently I've been studying also the ethical components of these algorithms and how to make it accessible to everybody, and that is fairness and all these issues associated with algorithms. And I'm looking for PhD students and postdocs. So if you're interested, just let me know.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. And next is Patrick Kamongi. You're welcome to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Patrick. I am in Maryland. I'm currently a postdoc at the National Institute of Standard Technology, NIST. I work in the cyber physical system group where we deal with co-simulation at scale. And I also work on a solar energy project using deep learning to forecast occlusion events. And last year at ETHIOPIA, I was at the LatinX event. That's how I get introduced to you guys, and I enjoyed meeting you there and here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then we've got Ralph Cherry. Would you like to unmute yourself? Okay, it's possible.
Hello,
Ralph.
hello, Laura.
Hi, okay, great. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
great. No, I wasn't sure. Yeah, hi, I'm Ralph. I'm the Director of Business Development of MyTax. We're a nonprofit based out of Canada, and we basically make the bridge, build a bridge between research and industry. So basically, we co-finance internships for master students, PhDs, as well as postdocs, and we're in every sector, including AI and telecom. And I mean, I'd helped out at one event last year, and right now in my new role, if there's any students that'd be interested in research-based internships, they're more than welcome to contact me. I will leave my email address in the chat, in the group chat.
Thank you very much. Okay, and we've got Rodrigo Navarro. Would you like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon. I'm Rodrigo Navarro. I'm an independent consultant for artificial intelligence projects, helping currently with commercial aviation and some other commercial activities, but lately more into the medical research with a couple of universities in Colombia, South America, and also, well, I'm located in the DC area in the US.
Great, thank you for being here. And it looks like we have Rosa, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your second last name, or your first last name, Yanke. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Rosa Pacotagia. I am a master student at University of Campinas in Brazil, and I am working now with few short learning methods.
Wonderful, thank you very much for joining us. And we're almost done with the list. We've got Servando is next. Would you mind unmuting yourself and saying hi to the group?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you guys. I'm Servando. I'm from Mexico, but I'm living in Madrid right now. I think I'm almost the only one that is not involved in research. I'm working in industry as a data scientist, and yeah, working in projects with computer vision using geospatial data. So yeah, pleasure to meet you.
Great, thank you for joining us. And lastly, but not least, we've got Zig Hampel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, good afternoon. My name is Zig Hampel. I'm a data scientist. I work for a nonprofit VC firm as a research scientist, primarily working in understanding capabilities and limitations of generative models. And we also have some RL projects, including one that's part of a workshop at this winter's NeurIPS. I split my time between the Bay and New Mexico, northern New Mexico. So if anyone needs any networking or internship opportunities, feel free to contact me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, great. So let's dive into our discussion session. I've got a few questions for the group that I thought would get us started. And then of course, if there are any questions that you have as well, you can feel free to post them in the chat, or if you want to wait till my questions are over, then please go ahead and unmute yourself. Or if you think of a question that is prompted from a question we've already asked, or something that someone else says that you would like to propose to the group, again, please feel free just to interject. I prefer that these sessions are very interactive and we all get an opportunity to speak and share our thoughts and our experience. So the first question we have is, what is the current state of artificial intelligence in your area? And when you answer this, I would really want you to think about, not just where you're working, so like the company or institution that you're with potentially, but also, where you're living. What people around you, your peers, think about artificial intelligence. If you're not currently working in the field, maybe what your family or your friends think about AI. I think it's really a good idea to really share what those different perspectives of artificial intelligence are to kind of the larger world and our communities around us. So does anyone want to jump right in and kind of give their perspective to what the current state of artificial intelligence is in their area?
I can speak. My name is
Yes.
Crystal. I think that in my area, I'm in Vermont. So I moved from California to go to school. And in Vermont, Vermont.
Alejandro, we have Crystal speaking. 1 second.
Okay. Sorry. In Vermont, I think a lot of people a lot of the locals don't trust AI. I can point to 2 explicit examples. One of them is research I'm working on with the district attorney's office for DUIs. And a while ago, a migrant group actually sued the state for use of their facial recognition software. So there's that. And then just speaking with people who grew up in Vermont, and they know that we're pretty close to Montreal and that our researchers do AI, there's a lack of trust in general and ethical concerns with regards to AI.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for sharing. So it looks like we have a hand raised here. Let me go to Servando. Did you want to jump in next?
Yeah, although I think Alejandro was going to talk, if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, Alejandro, are you ready?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
All right, just a few thoughts. This is a very good question. Well, speaking from my experience here in Madrid and coming up from industry, I think in industry there's a massive gap in adoption in AI solutions, in machine learning solutions. Although there's a lot of buzzwords and buzzwords sell, and primarily that is like the main goal of industry, selling products or selling whatever. I'm seeing there is a ton of like advertisement of I am adopting this huge AI ML and putting ML in everywhere and stuff like that. But when you deep dive into these solutions, there is it's humo, right? It's just foggy little things. So in conclusion, I would say that there's a huge work in adopting ML, and it has to come from experienced AI practitioners, either from industry or research, but with a good communications to all upper management. Or this is an industry-based opinion. I don't know if you guys share it.
Thank you, Servando. So you're saying that you're seeing a lot of change happening, but it's not necessarily coming from the right place. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is, this is a huge community. Like in Spain, and especially Madrid, there's a huge machine learning community and AI community. There's a lot of enthusiasts and a lot of line of work. But once you are working, I used to work in management consulting, and once you are working in industries, at least in my experience, it's more what what the average company is trying to sell you, putting in the PowerPoint slides a lot of buzzwords like deep learning, AI, and stuff. Once you get to know the actual solution, it's it's kind of like it's not what the PowerPoint slide says. It's what I'm saying is it's there's a road ahead to adopt these kind of solutions. I don't know if it's lack of trust, but or I don't know.
Yeah, so what I hear is you're saying that there seems to be a lot of false advertisements happening within artificial intelligence where you're from, but actual adoption of AI is not necessarily as big as you would like it to be. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think false advertisement would say, yeah, I think like exaggerated advertisement. I would probably say, but yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to discuss this, but yeah, that is what I was thinking.
Thank you. Yes. And so does anyone else have comments on either what Crystal shared, that you know, in her area in Vermont, people are kind of afraid of artificial intelligence, or they're not quite ready? I think that feeds in very well to what you said, Servando, as well, that either there's a lot of false advertisements happening or the adoption is not being taken up as well. What are some other opinions on that?
Well, if I may add, because I mean, part of my daily task is actually to talk to companies that would have needs to fix their issues to technology, and a lot of times, whenever they would expect like the companies would expect that solutions would come from AI, just because like in Montreal, in particular, in Canada as a whole, like AI is as you know, is quite a buzzword. So they always believe that they require some machine learning type solution, and a lot of time it's not really the case. But what we found is that what would happen in academia is that a lot of times like the professors that are invested in that field are getting so much support from large companies. We can just think about, you know, like the main star in Canada, right? Like Benjo or what have you, that then the companies do not find this academic supervisors that they can collaborate with. Whereas if they would go to a computer scientist or mathematician, or like find a non quote unquote AI solution, they would be able to provide the resources. So just to build on what I believe Serverdo had mentioned, there's a lot of hype, and a lot of times too is that there's quite a difference between theory and practice, because you know, in order to have a clean and efficient solution, you do need to have data that's more or less clean or what have you. And then when you're dealing with the companies that have been involving for a number of years, you know, you're dealing with legacy system or what have you. So there's quite a large gap between you know, what would be ideal and what is happening in reality.
Great, thank you, Ralph. So that's another great insight about what's kind of happening in Montreal and some different areas of academia and large institutions. Has anyone else experienced something maybe different in another country or another city where maybe people are not as afraid of artificial intelligence, or they've had more exposure? I know for myself, you know, going from the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, obviously most of the people I've been around work in tech, and they have, at this point at least, after a few years, you know, enough experience in artificial intelligence to understand what it means. So it's you know, it's not as scary anymore. But what about in another country, or maybe an area that is not as focused on you know, the tech industry?
I have a quick comment about that. So prior to moving to the Bay, I was a postdoc in Belgium, and I almost went into industry there, but by kind of seeing what kind of solutions they were implementing, the industries that they were that say startups, or what we might consider small startups, were targeting were primarily contracts with the government. And so they were looking for very safe bets to work with data that was provided to them by, say, the train industry or the airports, something that was very manageable, that was not risky at all. There wasn't much profit to be made. But the result of that is that a significant amount of their work didn't impact the daily lives of people, at least not on a visible level. So it might impact how maybe train routings or train schedules might be determined, but it wasn't an interaction with people at a level where they understood that was happening. It was very under the surface. Whereas in the Bay, or in a place with some national lab nearby, like back home in Los Alamos, yes, it's very much in your face, regardless of whether it's under the surface and you know it's there, and you're perhaps could be scared of it, or you accept it, or it's in your face because it's on your phone or whatnot. So it certainly can vary based on your location.
Thank you, Zig. I appreciate that. So yeah, so different places in Europe, of course, are going to have a very different perception of what AI is and how it's being used. And unless people really understand what's happening kind of behind the computer, behind our cell phone screens and all the apps that we're interacting with, it would be hard for them to really comprehend what artificial intelligence is. So those are some really great points. How about anyone else? Is there anyone here that's currently living or working in a South American country that would like to share their experience and kind of what the current state of AI is in their area?
Yeah, I would like to add, I'm coming from Guatemala, and there's absolutely nothing in AI. Everything is just read on the news. And actually, I just got contacted by a company that they want to apply some AI solutions to their company, to their businesses in Guatemala. But many of them can be easily solved by classical solutions. So not only is there like a misconception of what is AI, but nobody really understands what can be done and what shouldn't be done with it. So yeah, you have the worst thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diego. Great. And I see Maria also raising her hand. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I'm from Venezuela. So obviously we have the crisis and everything. And with really AI here is like a myth. Like we knew it exists like in United States or in Canada or in Europe, but it's not something that we think we can learn. And for example, in my school, you had networking, you have databases, you have other things, but AI, even though it's so important currently, we don't have like one place to learn about it. And this is common in, I think, almost every university here. I try to form a group in my university, but we don't have like professors, we don't have like anyone to teach us. So we are basically just seeing videos on YouTube or doing fast AI courses and things like that. So it is sad because I think we are like missing everything. I don't know what you.
Thank you, Maria. That's a really good point. It's something that we've learned a lot at LatinX and AI about, different countries around the world. Unfortunately, there isn't access to mentoring or university professors in the way that there are in countries like the US and Europe. And so oftentimes new incoming researchers or engineers are lacking that opportunity to ask questions and learn even from their peers, but also from more experienced people within their career. So that's a really great point. And I hope if you do have the opportunity to participate in our mentoring program, that you do join us and also share that with your network, and hopefully that'll help fill that gap just a little bit. Servando, did you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, sorry to interrupt you. That you are talking about the mentorship program. I was just browsing your website, and I'm really interested in this program. Could you share a few thoughts about this? How does this work? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So originally, we've hosted a very, very short segments of mentoring alongside our traditional workshops, our official workshops that we host at these large and machine learning conferences. But they primarily happen on site, so someone would have to be in person at the conference, which we understand is a huge barrier to entry for a lot of individuals, especially coming from South America and Central America. So even though we do try to increase that representation through the travel grants that we've been able to provide, not everyone can attend for varying reasons. So we've decided to expand our mentoring program beyond just the in-person workshop. And so these sessions are going to be hosted virtually now. So what we've done is we have basically signups available for individuals who want to either be mentors or mentees. And once you register for that mentoring program, what we do is we pair you based on different information that you've inserted into the form. So, if it's you have a specific specialization that you're interested in, for example, or if you're experienced in a specific area, we would connect two different researchers or two different individuals in that space. Or if a mentee says that they're specifically looking for someone who has gotten a PhD in a specific country, and so they would like to talk to someone that has gone through that process and navigated getting a visa and getting accepted and all of that, we would pair them with someone who has already accomplished that, hopefully, if we can find that individual for them. But the goal is to increase that access, right, and provide that opportunity for people. And yes, I see a comment in the chat as well. Visas are also a huge issue. So yes, that's in regards to attending these sessions in person, which is why it's so nice that we can actually do this virtually today as well. But yes, so the goal, of course, would be to expand that mentoring program. And so this will be our first one that we're hosting virtually. And the goal is to have it take place over a 3-month time period. And so as a mentor, if you sign up, basically you would just be asked to meet with your mentee once a month over a 3-month period. You can increase those sessions if you'd like, if you have the time available. We're asking for a minimum of once a month, leading up to our next full workshop at ICML. And the time period is just because we happen to also be planning those workshops, during those time periods. So it makes it easier to align them together. But ideally, also for anyone that's going to be presenting at the event, whether it's a poster session or an oral session, it'll also help increase their confidence and, their reassurance of the work that they'll be sharing during the event itself, if you're going to be doing that. And then for the mentors, we also encourage a lot of our, corporate sponsors and partners to get involved, and especially if they have, internships or fellowships available, with their company, then it would kind of give them that opportunity to get a one-on-one, time period with an incoming person that potentially would really appreciate having that opportunity to work at a company like theirs. So I think it provides a lot of, a lot of benefits to both the mentor and the mentee. We will follow up with surveys after each session. And then for the mentors, of course, if you complete the mentoring of an incoming mentee and you answer our survey or evaluation survey, which of course helps us improve the program in the future, we will also be offering $25 gift cards for those individuals. So, we highly encourage you to participate if you are more experienced and you have the time available to do so. In the future, we will be, and this is part of what I haven't gone over in detail yet, we're currently building out a full platform for LatinX and AI because currently we're communicating on all these disparate platforms. We use Slack and Google Groups and, mailing lists and, all these different channels. And so we would really like to bring that all together into one place. And so we're having a full app built out for us, which will be replacing our current website. And then the goal kind of in phase 2 of that development would be to incorporate that virtual mentorship program through the application. So it's all done, through an automated process, which would be really great. So if anyone has any questions about that program, please feel free to reach out to myself or the rest of the board for LatinX and AI at latinxandai@accel.ai. We'll be happy to answer your questions there. But does anyone else, coming back to the discussion that we're currently having, does anyone else have a comment that they want to share about the current state of artificial intelligence in your area that you think would be valuable for the group?
So I wanted to circle back to the comment about that mark. And my second comment is that I know that sometimes it feels that there's a hype and buzzwords all around the place, and still it's hard to achieve things. So I see that inside Intel as well. So don't believe that it's easy, even if you are in United States, for example. So there is a shared feeling here that these challenges are still going on, and sometimes I feel like there's a lot of people willing to do things and learn, and I think that is one direction that we should emphasize as a community in general, and that people needs to learn. We need tools to learn the things that are missing. There's a lot of good intentions, but it's hard. And even when we have a lot of tools, it's still not easy.
Great, thank you, Javier. So yeah, then the current state of AI can include also resources that have been made available within the past couple of years, because a lot are, as was mentioned earlier by Maria, people have more access to educational materials than ever before, right? Such as like Fast.ai and such, but that doesn't mean that individuals or even research institutions in some countries have those tools, as Javier was just saying, right? Oftentimes you can't do any of these large AI machine learning projects if the data is not available, if you don't have the computing power available, within your home or within your institution. So that's a really good point. Are there other tools that anyone thinks are currently lacking that would affect the current state of AI within your area? Okay, well, if no one has another comment on that, that's no problem. We can move on to the next question that I have here. So this next question is, who is currently driving innovation in your region? So when I ask that, what I mean is, for example, in the Bay Area in San Francisco, innovation is often thought to be driven by the large tech companies, right? And oftentimes also the startups, that are really coming up with all these new algorithms or publishing the most research. When you look at all these large AI and machine learning conferences and you look at the data that's come out about who's publishing the most and who's getting the most time speaking at these different events, right? It's pretty obvious who those organizations are or companies are. But I'm wondering maybe if that varies in different locations or within really just different locations in different countries. If that can change. Because I know in what I've heard in different areas is oftentimes it's more driven by academia, and oftentimes it could even be driven by the government and those different entities. So I'd like to hear kind of different perspectives on this and why you think those different groups are really driving AI in the space.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So here in El Paso, I feel like a lot of it is driven by academia. And then kind of like neighboring to El Paso, like the missile range and stuff like that. So government enterprises that are kind of pushing for solutions are the ones who are driving, I guess, yeah, innovations, sorry. But yeah, I don't see a lot of private companies or stuff like that pushing for that here. I don't know if it's, again, the stigma of adopting artificial intelligence solutions like robots taking over the world or what, but there's not much push for that here, at least in El Paso.
Great, thank you, Alejandro. So that's a really good point. In different areas where maybe there aren't a lot of big tech companies or startups, academia has been, you know, kind of the one or the group that's been pushing innovation forward. And I'm wondering if anyone else has a different experience, if there's a region where it's really a government-driven entity. Looks like I've got Patrick raising your hand. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you. So here I work at NIST, which is a government agency. So they receive mandate from the White House, for example, about how to maintain the leadership in AI, or recently about the COVID-19 response. So whenever those mandate comes through, the department decides who can contribute and drive the research inside.
Great, thank you, Patrick. So the government response, in your experience, has been driven a lot from grants, is what I'm hearing from the government, that are being given to different institutions within your area. Is that correct?
That's in part, but also to initiate research inside to get more money. So it's kind of like a both way.
Okay, so kind of like a cycle that's happening.
Yes.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Someone from a different country as well, maybe that you know, in South or Central America that wants to share where they see innovation being driven?
Yeah.
Hello. I can wait.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Philip. Yeah, like I'll have two comments. Here in Barcelona, there's a nice, well, there's a mixture of both. You're having from academia, maybe three, the government, academia, and companies. You know, like there's, but perhaps to single out one, it would be more like academia still. Like government is still lacking on how to push this. Of course, they give lots of scholarships to PhD students in AI and machine learning and everything, but not enough, you could say. Versus, and in academia itself, you can see many events happening. Like, for example, self-driving cars, there's the self-driving car competition going on, so you have that more buzz going on. So, yeah. And my other comment would be like, for example, going back to Guatemala, there's like, there is company, like there's one company that's actually leading this AI thing. And it's quite interesting because they've been doing this for quite some time. But if you could single out them, like they've been doing this for like 5 years now. So it's quite interesting what they're doing. Yeah, basically. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Diego. How about Felipe? Were you going to say something?
Yes, I want to say about my vision about Brazil, especially São Paulo region. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is only my vision. I think here things are being pushed on, mainly by academia, like because here research is made like mainly by academia, but like there are some tech companies that are investing a lot, but I don't think they produce like research and like, I mean, they don't produce papers and publish, but they use a lot of the knowledge produced in academia. I think that's my vision. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Felipe. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have the similar sentiment that they've experienced, that there's a lot of innovation happening, but maybe just not as much that's being acknowledged because they're not publishing?
I think more apart from governments or industries, companies, or even research, even academia, I think community and meetups and community-driven AI, it's driving a lot of innovations. I mean, like here in Madrid, there's a huge, a well-established machine learning communities that they by themselves build courses and meetups and even drive projects for social impact. And I think they are taking this innovation by their hands. And yeah, that's what I wanted to comment. All the enthusiasts that they just gather and set up a community, and yeah, they eventually build a really huge and well-established community with I don't know, like 100 members, all devoted. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's a really good point, that oftentimes innovation can be driven from the local community, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be academia or a startup or a large corporation, that just people getting together and wanting to see change. You know, they can do that just through these grassroots movements. So thank you, Servando. That's a great point. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next question. How would you like artificial intelligence to be more reflective of your community? What do you think is currently lacking? And when I say that, I mean, you know, again, not just potentially your local region or maybe your company or your institution, but also just you as an individual, how you identify. That could be the Latinx community, for example. You know, how would you like AI to be more reflective? So I've got Diego is raising his hand.
Oh yeah, that's super easy to me. For me, it's language. You know, language is very important. Like Guatemala has like around 30 dialects, so, and it's not being studied at all. Like, for example, many don't even speak Spanish, and it's very important for, like, all laws are in Spanish. You know, and what can you do if to help people, you know, or if they need help regarding matters of law, or for anything, like for buying things at the market, you know, like everything is in Spanish. So what can you do then? Or for medicine, for example. So yeah, like definitely language. Also for computer vision, I've been doing, well, I started some art project, basically doing some with some indigenous garments from Guatemala. But it started because of trying to do like a pattern recognition. You know, like there's a lot of designs that have been stolen by many companies. And so my idea was like, okay, maybe if I do some sort of classification or something to easily detect, like, hey, you know, like Sarah or whoever is is actually stealing this design, so then we can actually do something. And but yeah, that at the end turned out to be like a nightmare because there's not a data set of that. So I decided to do some more generative art. But yeah, like of course, there's basically in every field. that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. So yeah, that's an issue that's been raised many times over. I think you know, if you don't have proper language support, especially with a lot of new natural language processing tools and smart speakers, and even just processing of large data sets, like we heard earlier from Juan, you know, whether it be health data or, you know, social media data. If you can't understand different languages, then again, you know, it's not going to be representative of the world as a whole. So the more data that's available in other languages, and the more people that understand and are working on those issues as well, can really help drive innovation in artificial intelligence to be representative of those communities. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? How would you like AI to be more reflective of your community or the Latinx population as a whole? So how about with images, with facial recognition? Because I know that this is a subject that has been brought up not only earlier in this call, but also many, many times because of potential problems with people being misclassified in computer vision technology. or people using individuals' faces and basically developing data sets that will actually harm them, right? Here in the US, unfortunately, because of immigration issues and over policing, there have been a lot of problems, for example, with, judges or police using artificial intelligence technology and, potentially misclassifying individuals and saying that, they are actually guilty of things that they haven't done, or, maybe identifying them as someone who, maybe entered into the country illegally, even if they didn't. So how do you guys feel about that, the use of artificial intelligence, with facial recognition for people who identify as Latinx?
Would you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, I was just curious if, along the lines of this same question, so how would you like AI to be more reflective of the community? Are there potential issues where having AI be more reflective of the community, that could cause a problem, right? Like what has been brought up with facial recognition. So if we build up a large data set of Latinx individuals' faces, could that be used to harm them? Similar to what we have seen in the research that has been put out by ProPublica, for example. Excuse me. Are there any concerns from this group about that use, or do you think it's still worth it to develop not just language data sets, but also maybe image data sets of the Latinx population?
I think that would be worth build, but yeah, I think there's a huge concern about the data that will be biased if it's filled with Latin individuals. But Latin American communities, they lack a lot of resources that, yeah, I would say it would be worth it to build.
Any other thoughts? Anyone else for or against facial recognition with the Latinx population?
I think it's obviously a really tricky issue or sensitive issue. I wouldn't say I'm for or against. Well, yeah, I'm kind of for it, but this doesn't just apply to like Latinx communities. I think it can, if and when this technology goes and gets adopted in different countries, there's going to be different interests among who has the technology and how they're using it. So if anything, I don't know if it's even possible for for laws to be made before stuff like this happens. But it's really difficult to place a law when you don't really know how it's going to be violated, I guess. I don't know.
Great, thank you. Crystal has also said in the chat that issues of consent have to be considered. One example that comes to my mind is I know there are a lot of Latinx countries right now who have been using facial recognition for basically instituting it as like a CCTV to ensure that they're monitoring their citizens, and governments have told a lot of citizens that the reason why they're doing this and using this technology is to increase safety, right, and prevent burglary or other types of issues like that, or crime from happening. But many citizens believe that, again, that could be used against them. So let's see, Maria has raised her hand. Would you like to speak, Maria?
Yeah, I was thinking, I was watching a conference from Rachel Thomas, and she works with ethics in AI. And I think it is irresponsible because just a few weeks ago, I watched child pornography without searching for it on Twitter, and I think some stuff that could be like improved with AI are not improved, but at the same level, like there are some things that people are doing that we have like the technology to make it like better, and we are not doing it. I don't know if I'm making sense, like, but for me that was a wild like a shock, because I didn't expect to see that on my timeline. So I think we should make like a, I don't know, more acknowledgement, more knowledge about that, because we should like implement AI also for that, for security, for not having like all the like illegal content in public platforms.
Great, thank you, Maria. That's a really good point. Using artificial intelligence to do good and to ensure that you're not exposed to things that you don't want to be exposed to, right? So filtering out malicious content, filtering out fake news. I think those are all very important uses of artificial intelligence as well, and it's important that again, if you want to ensure that AI is reflective of your community, then it's being used in a way that actually helps people in your population as well. I see Ralph has unmuted himself. Ralph, did you want to say something?
Yes, I'd like to build on the facial recognition. I think it's especially important when we're talking about Latin American societies that are multiracial, that the quote unquote outliers are represented, because if the unconscious bias that is present in Latin American societies is applied to how the data sets are taken, like for example, the pictures of individual, there'll be so many false positive, and that will put the lives at risk of so many from coastal populations, like for instance in Venezuela, like around Lomas de Carwao, to indigenous communities and what have you. And because there's so many permutations, and that might diverge from the majority of the population, and it's something that is, to me, at least from my experience, that needs to be, the flag needs to be raised, because as more and more of these systems are being applied, there'll be definitely risk and potentially lives being lost because of that.
Yes, thank you, Ralph. That's a really important point. It's so much more important in places where there aren't necessarily protections for citizens or individuals, that the consequence isn't just not that going to jail is something that anyone wants, but when you actually also face risking your life and fear of persecution in that way. I think that's a very important point. Use of these types of technologies there comes with a much larger toll. So thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have a comment on this question before we move on to the next one? No? Okay. So the next question I have for you guys is enough being done currently to protect your data privacy? And again, I want you to really reflect on, where you're coming from, your region. I hear already Crystal in the chat saying nope, in all capital letters. And if not enough is being done, what more could be done? And how could we try to solve this problem better?
Well, I just wanted to say that living in a country based in the European Union, I would say the laws like GDPR are actually doing a great job.
Can you expand on that? What do you think they're doing that's being done well?
Well, for starters, for starters, Yeah, there's a lot of regulations about companies protecting, storing your data. I mean, there's a huge fines that if you don't give the proper consent, companies may have to deal with huge fines if they store your data without your consent. And practical issues like that. I would say, like in my experience, I would say, GDPR is protecting the data of the citizens in some ways. I would say I think it's not perfect, but I think it's a good example.
Thank you, Servando. So yeah, you know, the laws or the regulations that have been proposed by GDPR and enforced for European citizens are really great. And I think it's something that a lot of other countries have looked towards to model after for their data protection policies. But are there any examples people want to share where that's actually helped in their country or in their region, or any other examples where, you know, still maybe not enough is being done? What do you guys think? Maybe let's get someone who hasn't contributed yet. I'm just going to call out some names and see if, if you guys want to be part of the conversation. How about Xavier Samba? Do you want to add a note on that? No? Maybe Rosa, do you want to chime in? What's happening in your area? Or it looks like Xavier has unmuted himself. Do you want to speak, Xavier?
Yeah, hey. In terms of data privacy thing in Ecuador, there is not really regulations, but there is a big community on this and linking open data. And then try just to have like linking data and that data sets which are open, like they are open for the community, and mostly they are using on research. But I haven't seen like something like regulation itself to protect like data. And in fact, I feel it's like there is no control because there is a lot of technologies which are really old as well. And I've seen even in banks, which is like funny, like you can even see passwords, and so it's not really secure at all. And it's also because there is this gap between that companies, they are in their comfort zone, they don't want to move to new technologies, but also there is no regulations, the government, they don't regulate that. So in one sense, there is no regulations at all for like personal information, but there is also like on the side, like where like some universities try to push that, but there is not by itself something done by the government.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's that must be really tough to see even like passwords being shared. You know, through a banking institution. You would never imagine that would be.
Yeah, it's fun in some cases.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not too much malicious things are done with that information. Okay, and how about, let's see, someone else who has not spoken very much yet. Maybe Lourdes, do you want to chime in?
Hi, yeah. For example, I think that in Peru we don't have enough laws to protect our data. And even in the university, for example, we use user and a password. And some of my students told me that the website is not secure, that they can capture my user and password. And I think that even the university doesn't protect our data. And also I think that, for example, here in my country, when I subscribe to some website, they ask me my personal data, my email, After a few months, I can see that in my email, some companies send me advertisement, and that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So yeah, it's interesting to see how different companies get your information, right? When data is shared among different institutions and corporations that you're not expecting for them to do so. That happens here in the US a lot too, and it can be pretty scary sometimes when you think about your data privacy and if you did not opt in to them sharing that information. So thank you for joining the conversation there. I did have one other question, but we are actually at the end of our time for today. But maybe just I'll leave you with this thought. Do you believe AI is increasing inequality in any way? And just based on some of the conversation so far and some of the other questions that we've had today, it sounds like there are situations in which AI does increase inequality, right? Whether that be from access to resources, whether that be from not having the appropriate mentorship available for learning, whether that be from considering who is actually profiting off of artificial intelligence technology and who has access to get funding, whether that be for their research or their companies and so on. And then how things like data is being used by these corporations and entities, or even individuals who might have, might just be driven by either corporate greed or malicious intent in order to show you something you don't want to see, as was previously described, or to spread misinformation for their own, benefit or what have you. So, just think about that as, if you consider we're the ones that are developing artificial intelligence within our space, and in a lot of ways, we're the ones that are representing the Latinx and AI population in these international AI and machine learning conferences. It's important for us to also reflect positivity, right, and ensure that we're doing good work that actually helps people from our communities, and people that also don't understand artificial intelligence technology, as was brought up earlier, in different areas and different regions who lack exposure. There's a lot of fear and there's a lot of hype, and oftentimes that ignorance can cause problems and can make people afraid of even the researchers and the engineers that are doing the work. So it looks like Chris also said representation of the LXAI community in the history of AI as well. Yes, so it's important to increase that. And ensure that, through increasing the representation of people within our community and within our network, that'll decrease inequality and ensure that, we have a seat at the table. And so I really hope that you take this opportunity at ICLR, virtually for this week to get more involved with the rest of the community. And, I'm really glad everyone who joined the chat today had a chance to introduce themselves and to, bring up different parts of the conversation and reflect on their region. But now it's important to also share these thoughts and ideas with the larger community and ensure that they understand what's happening and what's unique about your region and the work that you're doing, and how you are part of the larger AI and machine learning community. So please join, the Rocket Chat for ICLR, get on those groups and talk to your peers. Please connect with people one-on-one. So all the people that were in the chat today, but also all the people within our network that weren't able to join today. So you can do that through going to our website, thelatinxai.org, and joining us also through social media channels. So Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can talk to our board directly by email at LatinXAI@AccelAI. And then also joining our membership. It's open and free, and through that you would get access to our mailing list and our private Google group where people post about different opportunities that are available. And you get access to, obviously, all of our different workshops and so on that we're hosting. So again, I'll implore you to, if you haven't already, submit your abstract to our next workshop, our official workshop that's happening that's going to be co-hosted with ICML. That's happening in July. We are doing the official peer review committee process. So, there will be a selection that happens of posters and oral presenters. That conference will also be hosted virtually this year. But then after that, of course, we're all hoping and praying that NeurIPS does happen in person, and in which case we'll be, being able to see all of your lovely faces again, in December. But thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I will be sending out a copy of this chat in the group in Rocket Chat, then also to those who signed up on Eventbrite to join us today. So thank you all again for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week and rest of your day.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.